Vice chair of the committee, meanwhile, Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney of Wyoming laid the blame for the attack directly at the feet of former President Trump, detailing how he repeatedly rebuffed pleas by his aides to call off the violent mob which was attacking police and lawmakers. She also had a sharp message for her Republican colleagues who have continued to back the former president and his lies.
In our country, we don't swear an oath to an individual or a political party. We take our oath to defend the United States Constitution, and that oath must mean something. Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
So, Mika, the New York Times has, at the heart of the investigation is a relentless Cheney. Of course, it lays out the entire committee, too, but there is no doubt Liz Cheney last night, I thought the committee was masterful in using a Republican, somebody who obviously comes from a family, a lifelong, who has a lifelong commitment to conservatism and to the Republican Party. And again, she's at the heart of this investigation.
She really is. Congresswoman Cheney also played recorded testimony from former Trump White House senior advisor Jared Kushner, in which Kushner dismissed the threats to resign from then White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who Cheney said was concerned about potentially lawless activity leading up to the January 6th attack.
Are you aware of instances where Pat Cipollone threatened to resign?
I kind of, like I said, my interest at that time was on trying to get as many pardons done. And I know that, he was always, him and the team were always saying, oh, we're going to resign. We're not going to be here if this happens, if that happens. So I kind of took it up to just be whining, to be honest with you.
But this is now New York Times chief White House correspondent and MSNBC political analyst Peter Baker. His latest piece is entitled "Trump is Depicted as a Would-Be Autocrat Seeking to Hang On to Power at All Costs." Also with us, MSNBC legal analyst Charles Coleman. So, Peter, front page of the Times, the January 6th hearings cast Trump as instigator. Front page of the Wall Street Journal, the January 6th committee lays out case in first public hearing. And I was struck by your news analysis of this in the Times. You write as your lead, in the entire 246-year history of the United States, there was surely never a more damning indictment presented against an American president than outlined tonight in a cavernous congressional hearing room where the future of democracy felt on the line. Let me ask you first, why did you draw the conclusion you drew? What did you find to be the most damning?
Well, I mean, think about it, Joe. We've had obviously rogue presidents in the past. We've had presidents who committed criminal acts, who probably violated the Constitution, certainly pushed the boundaries. We have never had a president who sought to hang on to power despite the obvious and clear verdict of the voters, and who went to great lengths, as was demonstrated last night by Liz Cheney and the committee, to subvert an election that was by all realistic accounts free and fair. It wasn't just that he complained or went to court or asked for recounts. He pressured state officials. He pressured election officials. He pressured members of Congress. He pressured the Justice Department. He pressured his own vice president to all do things that they told him were not right. And he persisted anyway. And so I think that the crimes that they alleged last night, in effect, and it was an allegation of criminal activity, go further toward, upending our system than anything any president has ever been accused of in a congressional hearing like that.
So, Charles, Peter talks about criminal activity. We've had others speaking of criminal activity that may have been revealed last night. At the top of our show at 6 o'clock hour on the East Coast, we had George Conway talk about how the Justice Department obviously was paying attention last night because there appeared to be so much evidence that could ultimately not point to other people around Donald Trump, but directly at Donald Trump himself for leading a conspiracy.
Absolutely, Joe. What we are seeing in terms of how this is being played out in public is the committee is playing to two different audiences. They are playing to the jury of public opinion, number one, and they are playing to the DOJ, number two. If you look at the language that Liz Cheney and Chairman Thompson used when they were giving their statements, they laid this out like an opening statement in a trial. And it's because they know that the DOJ is paying attention, and they are trying to give the DOJ as much as possible to make the decisions to move forward with criminal charges with people who should be responsible. And as you pointed out, the one difference that we are seeing now that everything has come together and is coming out as part of these public hearings, is that it's pointing directly at President Trump. And we haven't seen as much of that in the past as we are now. And I expect that we will see more of that as these hearings continue. We're going to see more of the connecting the dots. The public has been wondering for a very long time, what have you all been doing? What have you all uncovered during the course of this investigation? And I thought that they did a brilliant job of laying out, number one, where these dots are, and number two, how they're connected in a way that made it clear and intentional that this did not happen by accident, that this was not a mistake, that this was not revelry going amok, but that this was an actual plan, that they knew what would happen, and that they had the intent necessary to have committed these criminal acts. And so with the way that things were laid out and the language that was used, I fully expect that this committee is trying to push the DOJ to make a decision to bring criminal charges.
So, Charles, specifically sticking with your experience and your knowledge of the law, the connecting of the dots that we've seen so far, including some points that show that this was premeditated along the way, the interviews that we heard from last night, all the calls to Trump personally, kind of indicating he's the only one who can stop this. How much do they lead up to legal peril for Trump, or is that still something that seems out of reach?
Well, no, I actually think that what they were doing when you talk about those dots being connected is that they're laying the groundwork for knowledge and intent. One of the things that Donald Trump has been able to do throughout the course of his presidency is sort of claim this notion of plausible deniability. You know, if you think back to the first impeachment hearings, his sort of go-to was he really didn't know that it was wrong, or he really didn't know that what he did was that bad. And so what they're doing with this is they're showing that he was very intentional in how he acted, that he had full knowledge of what was going on, and that he wanted this to occur. So this is going to be a necessary step in trying to connect Donald Trump to these charges. And I think that they did a good job in terms of previewing exactly what their case is and how they intend to lay it out.
Peter Baker, it was striking to watch last night, this opening presentation, how many of the voices speaking on behalf of the committee and making the case for them were from the inner circle of the White House. Jared, Ivanka, the Attorney General, those White House advisors who told Mark Meadows there's no there to walk away from this because there is no fraud in this election. Joe Biden won the election. Leave it alone. Walk away. And how President Trump, former President Trump, knew that the lie was in fact a lie, and he pushed forward anyway and encouraged his supporters to come to the Capitol. He was willing, in fact, to risk the life not just of Nancy Pelosi and other members of Congress, but of his own vice president, to clear the way for that mob and for the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers to lead the mob into the Capitol in pursuit, perhaps, of his own vice president.
Yeah, not only willing to risk his vice president, seeming to almost encourage it by telling his staff, according to the testimony last night, that maybe Mike Pence deserves it, that maybe the supporters have it right. And that's an extraordinary thing, right? Mike Pence, of course, was deeply loyal to this president for 3 years and 11 months of that presidency, almost never did anything to break with President Trump or do anything to, differ with him, certainly in public anyway. But when push came to shove and he had no choice but to make a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn at the fork in the road, he chose to, subscribe to what he saw as the oath of the Constitution. And because of that, the President of the United States was willing to, at least in private, endorse the idea, however serious he was, that he deserved to be executed as a result, which I think says a lot about his state of mind. It says a lot about this president. And you're right, Willie, that a lot of the people who were seen last night at that hearing were people in the inner circle, people who knew better, people who knew that the election was not, in fact, stolen. The Attorney General, the president's own daughter, the president's own son-in-law, the president's own campaign lawyer. These people understood that. Some of them stood up to him, like Bill Barr, and said this is, using the word he used. He said that publicly as well in less earthy terms. Some of them didn't say anything, or at least not publicly, and didn't fight it. That would be Jared Kushner, for instance, who basically washed his hands of the whole thing and decided that he wasn't going to fight Rudy Giuliani and instead leave the field to the conspirators, to the Rudy Giulianis and the Sidney Powells. And because of that, basically did nothing to stop his father-in-law from, heading down the course that he was heading. And I think that's a very revelatory moment in a lot of ways about how this happened. How could this have taken place?